Good morning. Welcome to the Kingsport News Hour for the 19th day in the 12th month in the 16th year of Cheongi. This is Tim Elder sitting in for the second king of Jeongu, Kyung Ji-moon, and I am again sitting here without a tech team. Anyway, I'm sitting here without a tech team. I actually rely on them. I don't know if he understands how much I rely on him. Anyway, so yes. Anyway, let's get to it. Let's go to our. And the problem, of course, is that when I'm doing it alone, then it happens from time to time that actually I'm not able to share the pages, because when I do share the pages, I think what you see there is just a black screen. That happened before, so that's why I no longer share pages. I'm looking at them myself, and I think probably you can still see my face. But if I were to share like I would like to, it doesn't work. Anyway, so right now, let's look at what's going on around the kingdom. And right now in Chongpyeong, Tennessee, 28 degrees, mostly cloudy. Remaining mostly cloudy today, high of 41, mostly then getting a breezy and chilly intermittent snow and flurries this afternoon, accumulating according to an inch, it says. And then tonight, low of 24, a couple of evening snow showers, otherwise mostly cloudy, snowstorm total, an inch or two. Okay. And then in father's hometown of Cheongju in North Korea, North Pyongan province, Korea, currently 6 degrees, but with a real feel of 12 degrees below zero. So it's a lot colder than it feels a lot colder than it actually is. Clear and cold tonight, and a low of 2 degrees below zero. Tomorrow cold with plenty of sun, high of 18, it says. At the Cheongung Palace in northeast Pennsylvania, currently 7 degrees and a real feel of 14 degrees, but that's above zero. Mostly cloudy today with according to an inch of snow late this afternoon, high of 32. And tonight, intermittent snow and flurries with a little or no accumulation, and a low of 10 degrees. Okay. At the Liberty Rock RV Park and Campground in Limestone County, Texas, currently 44 degrees and clear, warmer with plenty of sunshine, high of 82, tonight clear and 44. At the Suncheon Palace in Korea, currently 33 degrees and a low of 21 tonight, cloudy and colder. Tomorrow mostly sunny and colder, breezy in the afternoon, high of 34. And at the Gunma Palaces in Japan, 42 degrees, clear, but becoming cloudy during the night, low of 32. Tomorrow cloudy and cooler, high of 40. And in Guangzhou, Guangdong, China, 79 degrees, cloudy, increasing clouds tonight, low of 61. Tomorrow pleasant with clouds and sun, high of 71. All right, let's go to Father's Word. Let's see here. Father's Word, we are in the book on the path of the person of Cheonuguk, yes, Songyagina Kyu, I'm sorry, of the completed Testament age. Path of the person of the completed Testament would be a literal translation. And we're in chapter 1, section 1, point 1, 1.1.1, okay. And we're in the final quotation of that subsection. So, 출발을 잘못하면 난데없는 곳으로 가는 겁니다. So, if you begin wrong, in other words, if you he's talking about the direction, I think. If you start out in the wrong direction, 난데없는 곳으로 가는 겁니다. You're going to wind up in a place that has nothing to do with anything. So, 난데없는 곳으로. You're going to be in the wrong place, or just not in the right place. 그렇기 때문에 배가 대해를 항해하더라도 출발한 항구에서부터 나침반을 중심 삼고 가야 할 목적지를 향하여 방향성을 그려 놓고야 가는 것입니다. And that is why when a ship sails on the high seas, right? When the ship sails on the big ocean, 대해 is a big ocean. He doesn't say they, but in Korean you often leave out the subject. They or centering on the compass, they will draw a line of their course, starting at the port where they leave, starting from the port where they leave, and going to the port where they arrive, or going to their desired destination. 그러면 인간이 출발한 항구가 어디냐 모르고 있습니다. So then, what port did human beings start out from? Where did we start from? 모르고 있습니다. Human beings don't know, right? Don't know. 목적지를 나침반을 가지고 피안의 세계에 도달할 수 있는 목적지를 그려갈 수 있는 방향성이 어디 있느냐? 없다는 것입니다. So, where is the sense of direction that allows human beings to use a compass to reach the other shore? The other shore, pian. Pian also in Buddhism, the other shore means the actually spirit world. The other shore is another expression for spirit world in Buddhism. 도달할 수 있는 목적을 그려갈 수 있는 방향성, or where's the sense of direction that allows them to draw to set a course, or to draw a course towards their objective, to their desired destination. 없다는 것입니다. They don't have it. 이게 꼴볼 제멋대로 왔다 갔다 했습니다. So they've just been going back and forth as they pleased. 이렇게 볼 때 인간은 제 아무리 한다고 해봤자 인간으로 끝나는 겁니다. So for this reason, no matter how much human beings may try, they cannot go beyond where they are. They cannot improve where they are. They cannot, in other words, well, we can't be any better than what we are already. In other words, we cannot reach God's salvation. Is the implication? Okay. Cannot reach God's kingdom of heaven. We're just going back and forth, wandering, stumbling around, wandering hither and what do you call it? Hither and thither, or whatever it is. Going back and forth without ever reaching any place that we want to get to. We all want to get to the kingdom of heaven because we all want to have love, right? We all want to experience love. We all want to experience God's love, but we cannot get there. All right. Alrighty then. So what's going on? Yes, we're really focusing on China these days, which is good because that is what is important. And let's start with Darwin because someone sent me that story. Darwin, we talked about Darwin once before, where China basically has leased, I guess. So I think the article will probably get into this. But anyway, China has a control over the port of Darwin, which is in northern Australia, right? And it's a very excellent place for China if they are trying to expand into the Indian Ocean. Now, Australia has decided that maybe that wasn't such a good idea. And as I recall, it was actually the local government, wasn't it, of Australia, not the Australian federal government, but the local government that made this deal with China, if I recall. Anyway, now Australia is trying to sort of walk that back. China's ambassador to Australia has warned Canberra against taking control of a port whose lease to a Chinese-owned company has been heavily scrutinized over its strategic significance. On Wednesday, Xiao Jian criticized the Australian government's moves as unethical and no way to do business. A land bridge group owned by Chinese billionaire Ye Chen has controlled Port Darwin, located in Australia's remote Northern Territory since 2015, under a 99-year lease agreement. Australian authorities reached the $350 million lease deal with Shandong province-based land bridge in the hope of the port's expansion would revitalize the economy of the largely rural territory. But Prime Minister Anthony Albanese pledged to return the port to Australian control during campaigning ahead of national elections in May last year, saying the facility should be run by a local company or the government. In his annual briefing to local media, Xiao said, "When you're losing money, you want to lease it to a foreign company, and when it's making money, you want to take it back." The ambassador said Beijing would take measures to defend Landbridge's interests if the Australian government tried to forcibly alter the lease agreement. We will see when it's time for us to say something, do something to reflect the Chinese government's position and protect our Chinese companies' legitimate interests, he said, without elaborating. Well, wait a second. The Chinese government's position. Why is the government? You would think, wait a second. Isn't this just a contract between two companies? It just happened to be one is Australian, one is Chinese. But no, the Chinese government has a position on this. Let's take a look here. Where is the Port of Darwin exactly? Port of Darwin. Map. Okay, let's take a look and see where it is. Okay. Let's take a look and see where it is. Okay, that's too close. We need to get a here we go. Yeah, okay. Yeah, now I don't know if I can. Oh, that's right. I'm not able to share this, am I? Oh, that's frustrating. I don't think I can. But anyway, if you can imagine, you can imagine Australia, right? You have Australia, okay? You have Australia, like that, right? And it's right at the top there. And to the west, you have the Indian Ocean. And to the east, you have the Coral Sea, and basically to the sort of South Pacific Ocean. And then to the north, you have the Philippine Sea and the North Pacific Ocean. So it's an extremely strategic port for anyone who's trying to take over the Indian and Pacific oceans, right? So you can see why China really thinks they got a good deal on this thing, right? And how did this happen in the first place, right? If I recall, it was actually was it? How did this happen? I don't think was it the federal government of Australia that signed this lease? Right. Okay, here we go. Yeah. So, let's take a look at this. So, following the 2012 election of the Country Liberal Party, the territory, this is the Northern Territories, okay, sought to raise funds for unspecified purposes through the sale of public assets, including the Territory Insurance Office and Darwin Port. All right, so they're privatizing the port. Okay, so far so good. In order to accomplish the latter, the territory made a request for expressions of interest in late 2014 and early 2015, resulting in 33 companies signaling their interest. In October 2015, the Chinese-owned Landbridge Group won the bid for a lease of Port Darwin. The then Country Liberal-controlled Northern Territory government, under then Chief Minister Adam Giles, granted the company a 99-year lease for $506 million. A one-time payment? Are you kidding me? Okay, well, U.S. got a pretty good deal for Alaska too, so maybe this is better than Alaska, but still, $506 million for 99 years? $5 million a year? These are Australian dollars, I assume, right? So, anyway, this is the Country Liberal controlled. So, I guess Country Liberal means the Liberal Party in Canberra. Anyway, the contract price was more than 25 times the profit the port had earned over the preceding 2 years, and Landbridge also promised to invest $200 million over a 25-year period. All right, well, if you put it that way, perhaps, okay. Shandong Land Bridge Group is a privately held company with headquarters in the city of Rizhao, Shandong Province, China. Well, come on, privately held in China, that, that's got to go with air quotes, right? Come on, privately held, which is owned by Ye Cheng, a billionaire with close ties to the Chinese Communist Party. Well, yeah, I mean, any billionaire in China is going to have close ties to the Chinese Communist Party, because if they don't have close ties, they're not going to last very long. They're not going to live very long. So, yes, of course he had close ties to the Chinese Communist Party. And, yeah, but this was a pretty big prize for the CCP. The details of the unsuccessful bids were not disclosed, with the government citing commercial in confidence reasons, but sources conflicted over the nature of these bids. Some sources stated that the bid from Land Bridge Group was the highest by a significant margin, while others stated that two bids, one from a European company and another from an Australian company, were comparable. It was hoped that Land Bridge's bid would result in new trade routes opening up for the territory's cattle, mining, and gas industries. In 2025, former Chief Minister Adam Giles defended his government's 2015 decision to lease and said if he had the chance, he would do it again. Giles also opposed any moves for the Australian government to take back the port. Concerns have been expressed over this leasing arrangement due to its strategic significance as part of China's Belt and Road Initiative. Concerns have also been expressed over the proximity of the port to a base where United States Marines are stationed on a rotational basis and to the Darwin International Airport, which is used jointly for military and civilian purposes. Funny how China, or at least people close to or having ties with the Chinese Communist Party, wind up buying or leasing land that is close to important U.S. bases around the world, isn't it? Very, very strange, very strange. In June 2019, development of a port at Glide Point, 40 kilometers north of Port Darwin, to be utilized by both military and commercial interests, was suggested as a counterbalance by federal Liberal Party MP and chair of the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Intelligence and Security, chair, that's the Andrew Hastie. Let me just check here. When they say Country Liberal Party, what is that? Country Liberal Party. Okay. Not to be confused with the Liberal Country Party. Okay. The Country Liberal Party of the Northern Territory. That's right. So this was a deal between China and the local government, basically. All right. Okay. Because the Country Liberal Party is the Country Liberal Party of the Northern Territory. So it's a local thing. It's a local state. If in the case of the U.S., it would be like a state thing. Commonly known as the Country Liberals, is a centre-right and conservative political party in Australia's Northern Territory. In territory politics, it operates in a two-party system with the Australian Labor Party. It also contests the federal elections as an associate of both the National Party and the Liberal Party of Australia. Okay. All right, so a little bit, politics in other countries are always confusing, but so the Country Liberal Party is the local governing party at that time. Anyway, okay, local. They were in charge of they were governing the Northern Territories. So security concerns. All right. In 2019, a proposal was launched by federal Labor MP Nick Champion to renationalize the port, thereby ending Chinese control. Okay, during the May 2025 Australian federal election campaign, so the Australian federal folks are a little bit upset that the local folks have basically made a 99-year deal with China. That's a pretty big thing, and I guess they didn't really consult the people in the capital so much. Both the Coalition and Australian Labor Party pledged to return the port to Australian ownership if elected. And so then the PRC's ambassador to China criticized the plan. Landbridge applauded the ambassador's comments. In late January 2026, that's what we're reading about now, Chinese ambassador Xiao Jian reiterated warnings to the Albanese government that plans to nationalize the port would adversely affect trade and diplomatic relations with China. So that's where we are. Okay. So let's go back to the story now that we understand a little bit. And, okay. And responding to Xiao's comments during a visit to East Timor on Wednesday, Albanese repeated his intention to return the facility to Australian control, describing it as being in the national interest. Despite years of controversy amid claims the port deal poses national security risks, multiple government reviews, including the one commissioned by Albanese, concluded there were no grounds to cancel or alter the agreement with the Chinese firm. China is Australia's top trading partner with two-way trade 24-25 totaling $218 billion, though relations between Beijing and Canberra have been tested in recent years by disputes over issues such as national security and human rights. Okay, so China is objecting to this, and and if it's just a commercial deal, then you would think, well, why is the Chinese government getting involved in this? But hey, listen, obviously, this is obviously a case where the Chinese government is saying, well, this is great. We've got a port there on the northern coast of Australia, going directly into the Indian Ocean and also to the east. So you got the Coral Sea and the Philippine Sea, and then the big wide Pacific Ocean. So this is a fantastic place. And if you look at the map, you can see how this is a militarily extremely sensitive port. But 99-year lease for what, $500 million? Even if those are U.S. dollars, still, well, I guess America doesn't have much, can't say much since we got a much better deal for Alaska back in the 19th century. But still, anyway. And I guess the federal government was sort of looking the other way when this happened, and now they're trying to play catch up. Well, I hope that they get it back, because that is not a port that you want the Chinese to be able to control. Meanwhile, a similar situation, I guess, is taking place in Panama, right, where the U.S. is struggling with China over influence in the Panama Canal region, right? And I guess this was discussed previously. I'm just adjusting my chair here. Anyway, let's take a look at this. I'm looking at CNBC now. The Panama Canal, a global trade artery that connects the Atlantic. Well, let's go ahead to the article here. This is on CNBC. The simmering dispute over two container ports at either end of the Panama Canal risks becoming a geopolitical flashpoint between the world's two largest economies, the U.S. and China. My goodness. Okay, who's writing this? Okay, I guess this is two CNBC writers, I guess. Okay. My goodness, okay. Flashpoint. It follows a contentious decision from Panama's top court voiding a license of a subsidiary of Hong Kong-based C.K. Hutchison for operating two key terminals on the waterway, through which some 40% of all U.S. container traffic transits every year. So 40% of all U.S. container traffic. The ruling was seen as a major victory for the U.S., given that the White House has made blocking China's influence over the global trade artery one of its top priorities. China has sought to raise the stakes in recent days. In its strongest rebuke yet, Beijing warned on Wednesday that the Central American country, that's Panama, will inevitably pay a heavy price, both politically and economically, unless it changes course. The Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office of China's State Council called the court decision logically flawed and utterly ridiculous. In response, Panama's President Jose Raul Mulino dismissed China's threats, saying on Wednesday that he firmly rejected the statement from the Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office, Molino said on social media that Panama was a rule of law country that respects decisions from its top court, noting that decisions taken by the judiciary were independent of the central government. C.K. Hutchison, for its part, said Wednesday that it had taken Panama to international arbitration, adding it strongly disagrees with the court's determination. Analysts expect the fallout from the ruling to last for quite some time, with questions lingering over the security risks posed by CK's management of the ports and whether any mitigation measures are in place. It looks like a, quote, simple contest for dominance in Latin America, unquote, said Scott Kennedy, a senior advisor at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Quoting here, Kennedy, the most likely scenario is a drawn-out legal fight in multiple jurisdictions along with substantial political and economic pressure imposed by both Beijing and Washington, Kennedy added. Relations between the two superpowers deteriorated last year as President Donald Trump imposed sweeping tariffs on Chinese exports, drawing Beijing to tighten its grip on rare earth exports. Geopolitical tensions, including Beijing's stance on Taiwan, support for Russia or the Ukraine, and U.S. military action in Venezuela and Iran have also weighed on relations. C.K. Hutchison had negotiated a $23 billion deal with a BlackRock-led consortium in March last year to sell its non-Chinese port subsidiaries. It later drew criticism from Beijing, which described the deal as kowtowing to American pressure. Chinese officials have sought to reshape the deal, demanding that it undergo China's merger review process, and have reportedly proposed state-owned shipping group COSCO to join the acquiring consortium. In a sign of further escalation, China directed state firms to halt talks over new projects in Panama. Bloomberg reported on Thursday and asked shipping firms to consider rerouting cargo through other ports. So, this is similar to what China does with the tourism traffic to places like Korea and Japan, right? Whenever Korea and Japan do something that the Chinese Communist Party doesn't like, the party says, well, okay, then we're not going to send any tourists your way, and you're going to lose all that income. And yeah, that's quite a bit of income. And right now, actually, because of conservative Prime Minister Takaichi saying things about Taiwan, the Chinese Communist Party is in fact discouraging Chinese from going to Japan. And so, especially during the upcoming Lunar New Year holiday, it's expected that all those people are going to be coming to Korea. And frankly, a lot of Japanese are saying, thank you, because they're not too happy with all the Chinese tourists going there and stomping all over Japan. In fact, I don't think this is because of China, but one town has canceled its cherry blossom viewing events this year. Did you hear about that in Japan? Because of tourists, because of the way that tourists act when they come. And anyway, so I think that may be Western tourists, but it's Chinese tourists too. Anyway, Japan is not particularly concerned about the lack of Chinese tourists. Some people are, I'm sure, but overall they're not. Okay. And we'll see how Korea handles the tidal wave of tourists that are about to come next week. Because it starts it actually starts pretty soon. I think it may have already started because they get a very, very long holiday or sort of holiday season surrounding the Lunar New Year. So anyway, let's see. So China's directed state firms to halt talks over new projects in Panama. So this is kind of the same thing as denying the tourists to Japan. And in the past, they've done it to Korea as well, and Korea's economy suffers as a result. China's customs authorities also plan to step up inspections on Panamanian imports, including bananas and coffee, according to Bloomberg. That said, chances of any response from Beijing propelling Panama to reverse course remain low, given Trump's view of the canal as a strategic choke point, said Jack Lee, an analyst at China Macro Group. Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, I think President Trump is pretty happy about that Supreme Court ruling, and he's going to make sure that Panama does not bend to China's wishes on this. China's response will likely be carefully calibrated and largely symbolic, aimed at signaling disapproval rather than forcing a policy reversal, he said, adding that the Panama episode exposes Beijing's vulnerability in safeguarding its economic interests in the region when challenged by U.S. pressure. Yeah, you betcha. Yeah. China has ramped up investment in strategic infrastructure across Latin America, including a major deepwater port in Peru. The port of Chancay, operated and majority owned by state-owned COSCO, is expected to cut shipping times by about half. Okay, I'm not sure how that works. But anyway, okay. Analysts at the Foundation for Defense of Democracy, a Washington-based think tank, warned that the Chinese government appears to have the maritime industry in a chokehold. FDDs, what is FDD? Oh, I see. Foundation for Defense of Democracy. Okay. Elaine Dezensky and Susan So said in an article published Monday that China controls more than 100 overseas ports on every continent except Antarctica and manufactures more than 95% of shipping containers and 70% of ship-to-shore cranes. China dominates the world's shipbuilding order books with nearly two-thirds of global orders flowing to Chinese yards in 2025, according to the industry report, citing data from maritime research firm Clarksons. My goodness. So they have control. China controls more than 100 overseas ports on every continent except Antarctica. And they manufacture more than 95% of shipping containers and 70% of ship-to-shore cranes. You know, that you see those things that you see on ports. They kind of look like something that came out of Star Wars movie. Meanwhile, around 40% of U.S. container traffic travels through the Panama Canal every year, which in all moves roughly $270 billion in cargo annually. Any expansion of Beijing's maritime dominance, therefore, could put the U.S. and its allies at risk of the same dependency they faced with critical minerals and rare earths, according to the FDD. And United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres recently called out the U.S. and China's power struggle, warning that global problems will not be resolved by one power calling the shots. We see, and many see in relation to the future, the idea that there are two poles, one centered in the U.S. and the other centered in China, Guterres said in a news conference on January 29th. If we want a stable world, whoa, wait a second. There's that word again. Stable world. Xi Jinping, his favorite word. If we want a stable world, if we want a world in which peace can be sustained, in which development can be generalized, and in which, in the end, our values will prevail, we need to support multipolarity. Oh, that's Xi Jinping's word too, right? Multipolarity. So Guterres, I guess, is in Xi Jinping's pocket, because he's talking about stability, he's talking about multipolarity. Yes. But, you know, if China wants multipolarity, then they need to tell us, what are the other poles, right? He was talking to the president of Uruguay, right? Uruguay, let's have multipolarity. Okay, so is Uruguay going to be one of those poles? Probably not. Probably not. No. So aside from China, who's going to be another pole? Okay, well, they may give a pole to Europe, I suppose, since Europe will. Russia, do you suppose? Okay, well, they'll symbolically give a pole to Russia too. Okay, and who else? That's about it. They're not going to give one to Japan, that's for sure. No. Remember, Japan lost the Second World War. We want to keep them in their place. They should always be the defeated nation for hundreds and thousands of years in the future. That's basically Chinese Communist Party's position. So they want a multipolar world, and now the UN Secretary General is even talking as if he's taking his talking points from the Chinese Communist Party. Yeah. All right. Uh, okay. The domestic stuff is so, I don't know. Uh, I'm just looking at this one on CNN where the headline says, I don't know if this is true or not, Trump promises Schumer funding for New York tunnel project if Penn Station and Dulles are renamed after him. Well, uh, all right. Okay, let's see. Let's, okay. Okay. Let's see. Where shall we go? Let's go to the Epic Times, I guess. Yeah. See what they're doing. Democrat race to fill New Jersey governor. Cheryl's seat too close to call. All right. Signs of strain emerge inside China's top military body after senior purge, according to insiders. Okay, well, let's take a look at this. I think this may be a bit old, but anyway, let's take a look at it. And also, there's another one here. Chinese, quote, hospital ship, unquote, touring Latin America suspected to have military objectives. That would be a good camouflage, wouldn't it? Let's take a look at the hospital ship. Yeah, the signs of strain. That's a speculation story. That's a speculation story. Okay. Let's take a look at this hospital ship. So, I'm looking at a map here. What is this? I see. So this hospital ship has been to various places around the Pacific. It's been to Nauru, in the Pacific, and then Fiji, Tonga, 2 visits to Tonga, and to Uruguay. It's been to Uruguay on the Atlantic coast. It's been and to Brazil. Wait a second? How does the ship? Oh, I see. To Rio de Janeiro. Okay, Rio de Janeiro, and it was in Barbados. It was in Jamaica, and Nicaragua, and it has a pending visit to Mexico. So what's going on here? A Chinese ship's ongoing tour of several Latin American countries is a medical service mission, or is a medical service mission according to Chinese authorities. But the ship's recent visit to Brazil heightened concerns that the hospital ship's mission is more than humanitarian, after Brazilian authorities were prevented from inspecting the massive vessel. When the ship, dubbed the Silk Road Ark, that's a strange name, reached Rio de Janeiro in early January, Brazilian authorities raised concerns that it was providing medical care without local authorization. Others feared that the unauthorized care could be a cover for information gathering or espionage. Concerns about the visit come alongside increasing U.S. attention to the region with the revival of the Monroe Doctrine under U.S. President Donald Trump and the capture of Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro. Meanwhile, Chinese state broadcaster CCTV in December 2025 showed war games with the People's Liberation Army simulating combat near Cuba, the Gulf of Mexico, and the Caribbean. According to experts, the Brazilian authorities who spoke with the Epoch Times, the objective of the tour could be linked to China's military buildup in the region in anticipation of a future direct conflict with the United States. It is clear that this hospital ship, the Silk Road Ark, is part of the Chinese naval forces. In other words, it is a military ship, even though it is a hospital ship. Evan Ellis, Latin America research professor at the U.S. Army War College, told the Epoch Times. The trajectory of the Silk Road Ark started in September 2025 in the South Pacific Islands. In November 2025, it headed to Latin America, making a technical stop before moving on to Jamaica, recently hit by Hurricane Melissa, then Barbados, and reaching Brazil on January 8th. The ship left Brazil on January 15th, spending It spent 4 days in Uruguay and is scheduled to visit Chile, Peru, and Mexico before heading back to China. According to Chinese authorities, the purpose of what has been called Mission Harmony 2025 is to conduct medical service and cultural exchange activities with other countries. The cultural exchange, that's always a ruse, yeah? But the ship, weighing more than 10,000 tons and belonging to the People's Liberation Army, gained significant attention during its stop in Brazil after officials received information that the Chinese crew was providing medical care to the local population without authorization from Brazilian authorities. And photos and reports indicated that the ship had military features. While authorities in Jamaica and Barbados had welcomed the medical care offered by the Chinese ship for their citizens, some Brazilian authorities were more cautious. No medical care provided by a foreign doctor within the national territory may be performed without the authorization of the Federal Council of Medicine. Brazilian Dr. Francisco Cardoso, who leads the agency in the state of Sao Paulo, told the Epoch Times. This includes foreign vessels in Brazilian waters. The Federal Council of Medicine is responsible for licensing physicians and enforcing compliance with medical laws. The ship had authorization from the Brazilian Navy to be docked in Brazilian waters. However, Cardoso and Federal Council of Medicine had not given the necessary authorization for the ship's personnel to perform medical procedures in Brazil. Allegations reached Cardoso and other authorities that the ship was offering unauthorized medical care to Brazilian citizens. In light of the allegations, so what do? Do they advertise, or do they go out there and say, come on, we've got this ship there and we got some wonderful Chinese medicine, or we got some good doctors here, we're going to give you free health care? Is that what they're doing? I don't know. In light of the allegations, Dr. Rafael Camara, a consultant to the Medical Council of Rio de Janeiro, the Brazilian state to which the ship was docked, was sent to the ship to conduct an inspection. He said his aim was to gather information about the medical care provided on the ship. Was there any substance abuse? What were all those people doing there? Was biological material collected, blood, whatever it was, we don't know, Camara told the Epoch Times. We don't know what they did there, and from our perspective, it puts the population at risk. He said he was concerned if unauthorized medical consultations or treatment has taken place, there would be no record of the treatment, complicating medical follow-up. Yes. Rio de Janeiro doesn't need any humanitarian aid. We have enough doctors in Rio de Janeiro, Camara said. We understand that there are other places that need this ship much more than Brazil. Upon arrival at the ship, Camara and his team had to wait for the Chinese consul, who was responsible for the operation, to come to the scene. The consul arrived in a van with several Chinese military personnel. However, the Chinese consul barred Camara from entering the ship. He also said that if we decided to send an official letter, he would not respond, Camara said. In my view, this was said in a hostile manner. Why say that he would not respond if we sent a letter? It does not seem to me to be the appropriate way to deal with a foreign agency that has the power and duty to oversee this. Cardoso said it is not normal for this type of inspection request by the authorities to be denied. They usually allow it, even to show that everything is in order. So did they then sort of cordon off the area and prevent people from boarding the ship? That would seem to be the logical thing to do. Camara said he contacted the State Health Secretariat, the body responsible for managing and coordinating the public health system at the state level. Although there is cooperation between the Regional Medical Council and the State of Rio de Janeiro and State Health Secretariat, the two agencies work independently. Authorities with the State Health Secretariat had initially promoted the ship's services and even held a reception for its personnel, Camara said. But when he attempted to address the issue with them, they denied that any medical care was provided. Chinese authorities also denied it. Okay. So here we have a photograph of the ship from up close, and there's a van here that could be an ambulance type situation, and also a a four-door sedan here, a black four-door sedan, with some people looking very serious. One guy is dressed in what appears to be a Navy uniform. Three others are sort of dressed in civilian clothes. And they're talking about something very seriously. Okay. The Epoch Times contacted the Rio de Janeiro State Health Secretariat for clarification as to whether the medical care was provided by the ship, who received it, and whether it was authorized by the Federal Council of Medicine. There is no mention in any communication from the Chinese authorities of any type of health care being provided on the Arctic Silk Road hospital ship, the Secretariat's office responded. The ship's visit to the country was the result of a request from the Chinese Navy to the Brazilian Navy. Camara said the Brazilian Health Regulatory Agency, the country's top health agency, told him that they were also unable to inspect the ship. They also could not inspect it because it was actually a war operation authorized by the Brazilian Ministry of Defense. Camara said. So in practice, it was supposedly a Chinese military medical ship providing care and not being inspected by health authorities. So has anyone actually gone there and gotten aspirin or something, or had their organs harvested? Former Brazilian Foreign Affairs Minister Ernesto Araujo told the Epoch Times that if the ship's mission was characterized as the presence of foreign forces on Brazilian territory, this would require prior authorization from Congress. So the plot thickens there. The ship's visit included a joint maritime exercise by the naval forces of both Brazil and China. The Chinese ship also demonstrated a combat and rescue operation. Cardoso said that for a hospital ship, it was at least 10 times larger than any similar ship on the market. There was military equipment on board, and not just a little, according to reports from dock workers. There was also a lot of communications equipment. This is unprecedented, unparalleled in our history, this type of ship docking here. Ella said the Chinese are doing military medical diplomacy, and other types of intelligence gathering cannot be ruled out either. The ship made stops in Nicaragua, but also in Jamaica, shortly before the start of the U.S. operation to capture Maduro, and also afterwards, he said. And here we also have a photograph of a bunch of people. Looks like I see a couple of people looking like they're Asians. It looks like they're singing something. Okay. This photograph was taken in Nicaragua. Okay. A July 2025 Center for Strategic and International Studies report labeled Jamaica's port of Kingston high risk because of its strategic location and the extent of Chinese influence there. Similarly, during its stop in Nicaragua in November 2025, the Chinese crew was received with a special ceremony presided over by high-level military officials, including the Minister of Defense, the Chief of the Nicaraguan Navy, the Commander-in-Chief of the Nicaraguan Army, and the President of the National Assembly. Araujo expressed concerns over China's motives. No Chinese action is gratuitous or routine, especially in an unprecedented case like this, he said. I believe that it was above all a message to President Lula, the Brazilian president, to indicate that China views Lula's rapprochement with President Trump with displeasure and that China will not easily abandon the immense influence it has gained in Brazil. The rapprochement between Brazil and the United States took place during the United Nations meeting in 2025 when Lula and Trump met shortly before Trump's official speech and agreed to hold an official meeting between the two leaders. This came after several months of growing tensions and a near standstill in diplomatic relations between the two countries. In July 2025, the U.S. State Department announced sanctions against Brazilian Supreme Court Justice Alexandra de Moraes for serious human rights abuse, specifically regarding the trial of former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro. In a social media post, Trump characterized the trial as witch hunt. Bolsonaro was ultimately sentenced to more than 27 years in prison. Okay, so it goes on a little bit more. So U.S. is trying to strengthen ties with the Brazilian government. Okay. All right. So skipping over some stuff here. Okay, so anyway, the visit of this Chinese ship in Rio de Janeiro is concerning some people. Okay, and then we have this story on the signs of strain emerge inside China's top military body. That would be the Central Military Commission, right? And Epoch Times says that they have talked with some people, but they're not naming their sources. And according to these insiders, low-level officers have sensed that senior leadership is scrambling to adapt and to mitigate gaps in coordination and execution. Okay. All right, so I don't like these unsourced stories. Yeah, but there's of course there's confusion in the CMC. That's not surprising. Okay. And China's anti-corruption drive deepens as Xi moves to secure continued rule. Yep. Let's see here. And let's see, we're looking at some other stuff here on the Epoch Times, and I don't see anything else that really interests me. This thing about nationalizing election. White House says Trump has no plans to deploy ICE at polls, won't rule out federal presence. We'll see what happens with that. But I think that's certainly, as I already said, nationalizing the elections is not a good idea. You need to, even the ID thing. Of course, people should have IDs in order to vote, but should be able to show that they are citizens in order to vote. Or even to register, they should be able to show that they're citizens. But still, that has to be a state by state or county by county situation, and not by the federal government. Here's something from El Salvador's President Bukele. Let's see here. El Salvador's Bukele says violent gangbangers are literal Satan worshippers in sharp immigration warning. This looks interesting. El Salvador President Nayib Bukele joined the annual National Prayer Breakfast in Washington, D.C. on Thursday, warning attendees that violent gang members in his country have a documented history of worshiping Satan, and that some of those gang members have crossed into the U.S. Trump also attended that National Prayer Breakfast, but I think I showed you a few days ago that they actually don't eat breakfast at these National Prayer Breakfasts, apparently. At least according to the photo that we saw. They were all sitting in chairs in what do they call it? Not classroom style, but what's the word for that? Anyway, there were no tables. There was no breakfast being served. Many people don't know that our enemy was not just the flesh and blood, but spiritual as well. This is Bukele speaking. The gangs didn't just murder, rape, and extort. They also worship Satan, Bukele said on Thursday morning from the U.S. Capitol. It's straight up, literally. When we went to their homes to arrest them, we discovered altars that were used for satanic rituals. This is well documented. We put up the pictures, the videos right away. But for some reason, the global mainstream media didn't think it was worth it to cover it. But we know gangs in El Salvador were satanic and they worship Satan, he continued. He warned the body of bipartisan lawmakers and business leaders. Some of those gangs are here in the United States. Bukele has previously warned that El Salvador's security forces found alleged MS-13 linked satanic altars and ritual materials during raids. Bukele is a Trump ally who struck a deal with the U.S. In 2025 to accept hundreds of Venezuelan gang members who were illegally living in the United States into El Salvador's notoriously no-nonsense high-security prison. Bukele said crime cratered in his country after snuffing out violent gang syndicates with prison time and law and order policies. And that's true. El Salvador used to be one of the most dangerous countries, but now it is quite safe, and its economy is actually doing quite well, I think. Let's see, how is the economy of El Salvador doing? Let's ask the AI here. El Salvador's economy is experiencing modest growth with GDP increase of 4.1% in the second quarter of 2025, driven by government initiatives and a focus on tourism despite challenges like high public debt and ongoing social issues. GDP growth, 4.1% in the second quarter of 2025 compared to the same period in the previous year. The annual growth rate is projected to be around 3.1% by the end of 2025, with long-term forecasts suggesting a trend towards 4.5% growth in 2026, and so forth. Okay. Tourism. The government is promoting tourism as a key growth area with projects like Surf City 2, aimed at improving infrastructure and attracting visitors. They have a public debt is 87.6% of GDP. Well, that's that's actually excellent according to the U.S. is more than 120%. Japan is more than 200%. But the AI says this is significantly higher than the median for small countries. For similar countries, this high level of debt poses risks to economic stability and growth. And let's see here. Overall, El Salvador's economy is on a path of modest recovery, bolstered by government initiatives and a focus on tourism. However, challenges such as high public debt and social issues remain significant hurdles that the government must address to ensure sustainable growth and stability in the future. All right, well. Okay, that's the Google AI version. Yeah. Okay, so anyway, he came to Washington for the National Prayer Breakfast and spoke about how gangs are worshiping Satan. Right. Okay. Praise God, praise God, praise God, yes. And it's good that Bukele is a really good guy, in my opinion. And I hope that El Salvador can continue to do well under him. I think they're still buying 1 Bitcoin a day. Is El Salvador still buying Bitcoin? I think because IMF told them to stop, but no, they're still buying Bitcoin. El Salvador is still buying Bitcoin, according to Google here. Despite recent changes in its legal status, the government has continued to purchase Bitcoin as part of its strategy, even after agreeing to limit its use under an IMF loan deal. However, the country has also faced criticism for the volatility of Bitcoin and its implementation, leading to a significant downgrade in its status as a legal tender. As of now, El Salvador maintains a strategic Bitcoin reserve and remains committed to promoting Bitcoin as a national asset. Well, this would be a good time, of course, for El Salvador to be buying Bitcoin, sort of dollar cost averaging, as it were, or in the case of El Salvador does they use the dollar. The dollar is their national currency. The U.S. dollar is their national currency, so they can use U.S. dollars and I guess they do use U.S. dollars to buy Bitcoin, and then they put it in their wallet. And actually, you can do a search online for El Salvador's Bitcoin wallet, and you can and it will show you. It's actually quite transparent at how much they add and how much they have right now, and so forth. So they're doing it quite transparently, but we'll see. We'll see how it works out. Because if Bitcoin goes up a lot, then that may solve their national debt problem. But right now, of course, Bitcoin is down. It's down about 50% from its all-time high. So this would be a good time to buy it for them, I suppose. I don't know if they will or not. I'm not advising them, and I'm not advising you either. Okay. Okay. All right, let's see here. What else do we have here? And U.S. accuses China of secret nuclear explosives tests. And did astronomers see a black hole explode? Okay. And still, I guess they're still looking for that mother of that journalist. And Russian General Vladimir Alexeyev shot multiple times in Moscow, Russian media reports. China has a $1 trillion super city plan, and I guess they're going to have a city that covers basically Beijing and Tianjin, and it's going to be a huge, hundreds of millions of people living there. Right. Family short-haul United flight from Orlando turns into a 17-hour nightmare. Okay, well, yeah. Yep, flying can be difficult. All right, gotta go. And so thank you for joining me today. And sorry I couldn't show you any of the pages that I was reading, but that's what happens when I don't have a tech team supporting me. All right, God bless, Godspeed. May His kingdom come quickly.